Okay, the Texans defensive line sucked last year, guys. It was awful. It was awful against the run in particular. And I know Jerry Hughes was a pretty good player on that front unit, but they needed to upgrade it. So yesterday they made a couple of interesting moves. They brought back Talvier Thomas in the secondary. That's not really significant, but they signed Sheldon Rankins away from the New York Jets, a 1-year, $10.5 million deal. This is a good start to fix the defensive line. Rankins played the last 2 years for the New York Jets. Robert Saleh, who has a similar defensive scheme to D'Amico Ryans, you would think, because both were on the 49ers coaching staff. And you add him to Hassan Ridgeway, good. You needed some interior depth. You had none. I think that was the most frustrating part of last year. I couldn't recognize any of those Texans defensive linemen by name. I didn't want to either, just given what I saw every single Sunday. So they need to upgrade that area. And they might have an opportunity to upgrade that area in the middle of the first round, because you might have seen Jalen Carter, thought by many to be a potential number 1 overall pick. Say the team like the Chicago Bears didn't trade out. Carter had a rough pro day. So he was 9 pounds heavier than he was at the combine. He looked gassed. He couldn't finish his drills due to cramping. And I mean, he's going through a lot. I think it's easy for a lot of us to look at Jalen Carter and think he is an absolutely despicable person for getting into all these Fast and Furious style street races, including one that may have led to a teammate and a Georgia staffer dying not long after the national championship victory for Georgia. And clearly he's had an issue with speeding before. I'm just going to put myself in Carter's shoes for this moment, and I can't speak for him. I don't know anything about him from a character perspective. I know we've seen some weird anonymous reports about him. Todd McShay, I think, specifically talking about how he might not be the kind of person you want in your locker room. All I'm going to say is, do you think that a guy in his early 20s maybe feels remorseful about a night like that, and that maybe he's distracted by it? That he might have been distracted before? He's a young guy. I'm not trying to make excuses for him here. All I'm trying to say is I can see why maybe the pro day that is being dissected the way it is yesterday didn't go his way. You're still hearing a lot of good things coming out of his teammates and his head coach at Georgia. This is what Kirby Smart had to say about a guy in Jalen Carter who he thinks is very special.
Yeah, he's a generational talent. He's very talented. I've been around, coaching for 18 years, and there's very few guys I've coached that have the talent that he has.
And Georgia's had a lot of talent over the last couple of years. Nolan Smith, equally talented, had himself a day at the NFL Combine. Did make a weird comment that I wanted to dissect for just a moment, because there's a little fun facts with history that we can dive into with this.
I got a left-handed brother that's just like that, so I guess that's why I understand him. Left-handed people do things in their own way, and you got to take their time with them. So,
can we pause for a moment and talk about how left-handed people used to be persecuted by Catholic schools? Did you know that if you went to a Catholic school back in the day, generally they had the same kind of desk where it was made for right-handed writing people? So the desk would essentially curve around your arm. You get in from the side, and it's set up for righties. If you were to go to a Catholic school, say in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, depending on the area, the people who were your teachers, which were generally nuns, did not like it if you wrote left-handed. They would try to make you right-handed. Perhaps they would do this using rulers. It was a thing. And I've wondered, seeing as there are some things that I do left-handed, eating food, something else, I want to know if perhaps, as someone who actually can throw a football decently far, left-handed, it looks weird, I'm wondering if I was left-handed and if the Catholic school I went to growing up pushed me away from it. Now, they didn't do it like physically, because, Catholic schools back in the day, smack, smack, smack. Anyway, I heard that comment from Nolan Smith, and I was like, oh, so Jalen Carter's weird because he's left-handed. Okay, you sound like nuns in the 1960s. But Nolan Smith also said this about the way that Jalen Carter's handled this off the field, as he termed it, situation.
I think he handled the off-field situation amazing just because of how it went. Like, we had to combine focusing on trying to put our best foot forward, and that happens, and then he took care of that and then came back to the combine and still handled his business and still was professional. So I think he handled it amazing, and I wouldn't handle it any different.
I don't know if you can say amazing because at his pro day, he's out of shape. But I do think that he deserves some respect for going back to Athens after a warrant was out for his arrest, checking in, and then going right back to Indianapolis to do interviews at the Combine. He's been through a lot recently. Obviously, he's still alive. He's very fortunate to still be alive. And I'm not trying to take responsibility away from him and what may have happened that night. It's awful, but it's young kids. I'm not going to damn the person for the rest of his life for a mistake that, again, I'm sure he regrets it. There's very few people in this world that experience something like that and aren't going to have just self-doubt, self-loathing after the fact. You know, it's so I'm hoping that he's able to turn things around. And I'm wondering if the Houston Texans would be willing to take a chance on him, because in the past, this is somebody they would stay away from. And perhaps that's still true. But I want to go back to DeMeco Ryans' introductory press conference with the Houston Texans. He had this to say about what he's looking to do as a head coach. I think it's really interesting.
And it was truly about just helping others. And that's what I want to do here with our guys, is just developing our young men, right? Developing the players to be the best players they can be on the field, but also I want to develop men to be the best men off the field, develop great husbands, great fathers, right? Great community men. That's what coaching is to me. It's about the development and delivery of men. And
you don't really think about a head coach in the NFL as being a life teacher in the same way that a high school football coach maybe could be, or a college football coach could be. You hired DeMeco Ryans, though, and clearly this is something that he wants to do. This is an opportunity for him to cook, say, Jalen Carter falls in the draft. So I'm really curious to know if the Texans look at DeMeco Ryans and believe that he is a molder of men. And that's not the reason to draft Jalen Carter. And if you have other doubts about it, okay, then maybe you pass on him. But if that guy falls to you at 12, a player that per some is considered to be a number 1, number 2 caliber prospect, given what you saw from him at Georgia, you have DeMeco Ryans at your disposal, and he wants to coach young men up. You should give him the opportunity if he falls into your lap at pick 12. You should really think about this if you're the Houston Texans. And again, we're talking about the draft. Draft speculation, I know, makes a lot of you roll your eyes. It makes me roll my eyes too. But this bad pro day for Jalen Carter at in Athens yesterday, I think it presents potentially an opportunity for the Houston Texans with that 12th overall spot, and an opportunity for DeMeco Ryans to make good on what he said at that introductory press conference.